do, I want to just do a little bit of acknowledging, if you don't mind. And I'm going to do it roughly in chronological order because the first person here that matters to me is my brother, who obviously was the first person in life in the room here I encountered. So John, I'm pleased that you're a member of this club. I want to go back to my beginning as a student, and as fate would have it, we students hired a flat in Duthie Street in Karori, and the neighbour was Peter McLaren. He had grey hair even then. And Peter took upon his role as flat supervisor. So whenever Peter felt that we needed morally realigning, he's the person that did it. Whatever modest success I have in life, I owe totally to Peter. I started as a family court judge in Auckland, and one of the first people I met there was the then counselling coordinator, Margaret Brown. And Margaret, it's a joy to have you here today because we go back a long way, and it wasn't long before our family joined the St Heliers Bay Presbyterian Church, and Denzel, there you were and here you still are. And the fact that you don't look much different to me astonishes me. So Denzel and Margaret, you've got a special place in my heart. I just also want to acknowledge Liz Tennant and Hannah, who's come from the Community Law Centre, because these are vital parts of our legal system in the country. You do an unsung hero's job, and you have my huge respect. When we did start as judges in 1988, for the very first time, there was a judges orientation course, and Susan, Lady Satyanand, who's here, in Anand, made history because we had the first ever judges orientation course in a motel, and it's still there. It's called Petone Foreshore Motor Lodge on the Petone Esplanade. And next time you go past that, you can look at it differently because that's where the first ever judges orientation course was. And Sir Anand Satyanand was the leader, and the Satyanands effectively parented us as new judges for a period of time. I want to acknowledge Rob McCann, who's unfortunately got to go soon because he is my right-hand person and enormous supporter, helper, administrator, everything to do with the White Ribbon campaign, almost single-handed. And Rob today has been up since the crack of dawn, handing out white ribbons and doing his job. So Rob, thank you for everything you do. Soon you've got to go, and I just want to thank you for coming to help me and to acknowledge you. And the last person, I'm not going to even endeavour to go around the whole room, but I do want to acknowledge my special friend Hewitt Humphrey. Every so often I realise that my diction slips, and I just listen to the news and then go into the bathroom and tweak for a while and listen to Hewitt's wondrous tones, and he gives me the diction to aspire to. So Hewitt, it's lovely to see you. Well, the White Ribbon campaign, and what is it? It had an unexpected boost, and I said to you I talk from the heart, so that's what I'm going to do. I think it had an unexpected boost this year when the Roastbusters story broke about a month or so ago. And most of us in this room all know about Roastbusters, and that's what happens these days. A story gets legs, and the whole country knows about it because of social media. And it's consumed a great deal of our interest, and the question is why? And why is it of interest to me, and why should it be of interest to you? Well, I think what most influenced me about that story and affected me was the attitudes of these guys and their attitudes to women. Not only were they prepared to skite about committing criminal acts of sexual violence, and there's no other way you can describe it, but it was the unadulterated bragging, which to me made me really, really worried. And often I've been asked about that story, so how's this happened and how's it developed and why do you think it's happened? And you know, in terms of Rotary and our four-way test and the Rotary themes we have year after year, we acknowledge that we Rotarians, I'm still really a Rotarian at heart, we do exercise leaderships. It is our society that we're building. When I look around the formidable talent in this room, and the jobs you have and have had, I don't know where leadership and values is going to come from if it doesn't come from us. So I asked myself the somewhat rhetorical question, where do these roastbusters learn this behaviour from, and how do they believe that the values are acceptable? Because I'm not going to be a right-wing moralist about this, far from it, but I do believe in values. I do believe that there's got to be an order of things, and there's got to be dignity and respect. Well, then we've had two other reasonably high-profile criminal cases. The one of the far north farmer Titford, who got an unprecedented 24 years for a conglomeration of offending. Now, in the mix there was not only sexual offending, but arson, you name it. There was a perjury, I think most things he seems to have managed to do. But there was a long, long period of sexual violence and other violence against his family. I listened to the interview of his wife. By the way, she broke ground because under our law, a victim of a sexual or domestic offence cannot have their name published, and that's to protect their privacy. Well, it goes, of course, that often the perpetrator can't have their name published either, otherwise it will identify them. So a lot of the offenders, we don't know, even if we might be working alongside them, because of suppression of name and the fact that that's said to be necessary to protect their families, and so it might be. But she decided she wasn't going to have a bar of this. So she said, I want my name to be published, and in that way, so can his. So we now know that this guy, apparently, and if you're like me, you'll wonder how we can do this, has been convicted and is sitting awaiting sentence while standing to be mayor in Northland. And you do shake your head and think, right. So there are a few things in the country yet to square, are there not? Then there was a case in the High Court in Auckland about 3 weeks ago, where on a Friday, Justice Graham Lang gave a father nearly the maximum of 10 years available for a long, long period of domestic violence, particularly on the children. So we're beginning to see, both I think with roastbusters and with the highlighting of some of these criminal offences, the tip of the problem in New Zealand. So why did I become involved in White Ribbon, and what is it? I think what I like about it is a benign campaign of the non-radical sort. The white is deliberate, and that's to signify and reflect peace. It started off in Canada. It started off after a misogynist had decided he was going to go out and kill women, and he did. And it's one of those ghastly North American murders where he just felt good about going out and killing about 12 women. And those of you who listened to someone on death row who finally got a lethal injection last week, when his interview, he was laughing as he was recounting the victims that he popped off. And this guy had done one of those mass things to make him feel good. So there was a feeling that men had to accept responsibility for this. Most domestic violence is perpetrated by men against women. Now, let's put this in perspective. Most men are not violent. Most men are not violent. But the vast majority of domestic violence that's caused is by men against women. So the rough stats from the top of my head are that about 6,000 applications for protection orders are made each year in the family court, and we make about 3,500 final orders. 92% of the applicants are female. It follows that the balance must be men. And although some men will say that violence goes both ways, and it does, there are situational instances where violence occurs, and that's so, but the really harmful, enduring, systematic stuff that I see is by men against women. So White Ribbon started as a campaign aimed at men and asking men if they would take responsibility. Now what we primarily are, it functions in this way. It's not a hugely resourced and well-funded campaign, but it's been under the umbrella of the Families Commission. It's funded to an extent each year, and that will pass over to an independent trust because the Families Commission is of the view it's time for White Ribbon to move on. In Australia, they did this a couple of years ago, and they have a very, very successful corporate model where they have a $2 million budget based in Sydney, a staff of 16, and some very, very good programs that run. And whilst I don't think we'll ever get to that heady stage, it does make me think that this is something with a good corporate model, and it's a good brand name, we can make it work. In terms of the next slide, if I could have that. So this is the website and Facebook, and that's primarily how it works. I'm about to refer the pledge to you in a second or two because we don't have a lot of time today, and therefore a couple of wrap-up points that I want to make. How do we make the message known and how do we get out there? Well, we're using IT hugely, and through the Facebook hits, use of Facebook comments, use of the website, that's our major reach. And often the group that we are most appealing to are IT Facebook users. So the website, enormously, enormously important. Just talking about technology, if you don't mind, before I come to what we're doing this year, I thought I'd just spend a minute on this, and then it's very much time that I take my leave. I said to Peter that I was still sitting and using my judge warrant, and how I'm doing that is a bit different to what was occurring when I was the principal family court judge. Every so often I sit on a Friday, and all the emergency applications for protection orders around the country now go into a central pool where they're scanned and put onto PDFs and put on a list. We have a thing called a National E-Duty Judge folder, and what I do is I sit at a computer all day and I pluck the one that I'm going to use, I pull the PDF, I read it. There's a whole host of menus I can pull down and make the orders that I want to, all automatically. So let's say that I'm doing a domestic violence order and I decide to grant it. I click a square and it populates this automatically according to pre-selected options that I've given. It might be an order preventing abduction from a child out of New Zealand, completely different act. I do the same thing, it populates it. I then click another button, it brings up my encrypted signature. That then is converted into a PDF and sent back to the Court of Origin, and it can all be done, depending on how quick I am and how big the document is, in about 20 minutes. So we're slowly moving, even in the Ministry of Justice, which Tracy Brown will know has often been called the Titanic of the public service. Even the Ministry of Justice is beginning to show signs of progress. And it's really good to see. So in this way, I want to keep up to date with what's happening out there. So this year, what are we up to? Well, I've deliberately put ribbons at your desks because this is the day we wear them. It's White Ribbon Day. It's not an organisation where we ask people to give. It's more an awareness thing. And it's more asking men to step up to the mark. And it's asking people all over the country, media, leadership roles, politicians, you name it, to accept that we blokes have to accept responsibility for this. And sadly, some of you know situations in which either your adult children or friends of yours who are adult children have inextricably and inexplicably found themselves in a domestic violent relationship. And extracting out of it is so very painful, especially for protective grandparents. So it is work that strikes at the heart. The last slide is the pledge. So this is a guy called Harry Nata, who was an all-white. Those of you may remember him. And what we've got on the website then is this pledge. I promise never to commit, condone or remain silent about violence towards women. The pledge I quite like, but it really, really came home to me, and can I perhaps finish on this note? We did a launch in Auckland of our ambassadors, and the launch generally on the 11th of November, and I sat next to dinner Mark Longley, and his daughter Emily was strangled or suffocated or both by Elliot Turner in London. And those of you may remember this dreadful case, this beautiful, beautiful creature of 17 or 18 whose life was snuffed out with this arrogant man. And the lovely father who manages to talk about it painfully but without going over the top in terms of his grief, said that what riled him was that Elliot Turner had skited in the pub to his mates that he was going to kill Emily, and he'd actually showed them and played out how he was going to go about it. And he said if only they'd said something, if only they'd alerted someone to what he was going to do, and within a fortnight, Elliot Turner had done it. And I think that this is where the poignancy of condone or remain silent. I don't suggest for a moment that to some groups I need to exhort you not to commit. But it's surprising in the workplace how the signs of violence can be there, they can be brewing, and it is ever the need for us to be watchful and vigilant. And we need to be able to do something about it and to show that it's not acceptable. So that's the pledge. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to come. It's a campaign which means a lot. I think we will change behaviour and attitudes. We've done it with smoking, we've done it with drink drive, we've done it with speed. Years ago, a lot of us didn't even want to wear seatbelts or crash helmets. And now you look askance when you see someone who's transgressed those things. And I think that years down the track, we'll look back on this era and thank goodness that we have changed. Thank you very much. Can I say that some of us have been promoting, I am meant to be a law reformer by profession, so I suppose this gives me a license to say this. I feel that when there is violence, an aggravating feature ought to be the fact that it's from a domestic setting. That in itself ought to be an aggravating feature. So I'm hopeful that we will increase our deterrent aspect of family violence. It's the messaging that to me is important. And the messaging can occur in all sorts of ways, the way in which I'm doing it today, but you do when you read heavy sentences and what judges say, I hope that for some people they pick up the vibe. So maybe we'll move towards deterrence, which is more meaningful. I take your point, and we need to be unequivocal. Thank you.